What happened on October 12th, 2002 in Valdosta, Georgia? And where is Paula and Brandon Wade? These are two questions that continue to haunt the family of missing Paula Wade and her 3-year-old son, Brandon Wade. Paula walked out of the Valdosta Sam's Club where she worked on Saturday, October the 12th, and no one has seen her or her 3-year-old since that day. I'd like to start this episode with two quotes, one by C.S. Lewis that says, "Courage is not simply one of the virtues, but the form of every virtue at the testing point." And Louis C.K. says, "I've learned from experience that if you work harder at it and apply more energy and time to it and more consistency, you get a better result. It comes from the work." Paula Wade grew up all over the world as a child with her family. Her parents traveled together while Paula's father was in the military, and after getting to know more about them, I can say that her family is best described as individuals who are rooted in faith and consistency. The same can be said about the 2-decade search for answers about what happened to Paula and Brandon. They continue to faithfully, consistently search for them. In 2021, just before the 19th anniversary of the disappearance of Paula and Brandon Wade, is the first time I really began to learn more about the details surrounding their disappearance. It's hard to believe that 4 years have passed, and it's even harder to believe that over 22 years have passed since Paula and Brandon were separated from their family in some twisted standoff with the truth. Now, in this episode, we're going to cover quite a bit of information and we're going to recap the overall details. And for those who have been following their story, stay tuned. Don't go anywhere because we have new information to share. In this episode, we'll share information that has never been publicly discussed. Over 2 decades ago, as the seasons began to change, the Valdosta University football team played an afternoon game against the University of Arkansas, and multiple events were happening in town. If there was a 5K and just a lot of things going on in town that day. And it would end up being a very warm fall day. It's quite typical to be that warm in South Georgia that time of the year. Paula was spending her last week in Valdosta after reaching a crossroads that would require her to make a choice. Now, Valdosta, it embodies every iconic benchmark of Southern life in the United States. Football and food are currency, and everyone has a pastor in the family. The weather is always unseasonably warm in comparison to the majority of the country, and remnants of a troubled history are present in the everyday lives of residents who call Valdosta home. Now, Paula's husband, Lance Wade, he was in the Air Force, which is why they were living in Valdosta near the Moody Air Force Base. Lance was later transferred to South Carolina, and meanwhile, Paula stayed in Valdosta, where she was moving up in the job that she held at Sam's Club. They relied on her additional income as a family, and unfortunately, Sam's Club was unable to transfer Paula near the base that Lance was transferred to in South Carolina. And Paula spent some time contemplating what to do. After Lance was transferred to South Carolina, Paula considered getting a roommate while she decided what to do next. A person in Valdosta, an individual that would have appeared credible to Paula, mentioned that they knew somebody who was looking for a place to stay. A student who moved to the area to attend Valdosta State University. It seemed like an ideal opportunity to save some money while preparing for her and Brandon's next steps, whatever those were going to be. Paula's new roommate, Marcus Burrows, moved to her apartment during a time when his life also seemed to be at a crossroads. Marcus was allegedly kicked out of Valdosta State University that he moved to Valdosta to attend. Now, she eventually decided that she wanted to keep working for Sam's Club, and the best way to do that would be to move towards family or where her husband Lance was stationed. She eventually decided that she would move to Florida, where she could maintain her job by being transferred to a store that's close to her family. On October 12th, with just 1 week left to finish packing, life for Paula and Brandon was busy as she continued working full time, and she also fit in time to see friends that she had made in the area, maybe say a few goodbyes before leaving town. Now, meanwhile, Paula's mother and father, they were preparing to soon leave Florida and head to Valdosta with a moving truck to pack up Paula's apartment and travel back to Florida with Paula and Brandon. They planned to catch up at their normal time, Sunday at 6:30 p.m., when they would likely discuss the remaining details of their trip. No matter what the distance was between them, this is not a family that loses contact, even for short periods of time. A week without contact was absolutely unheard of. Paula's parents, they spoke to all of their children every week, each of their kids. They had a scheduled time that they would actually catch up on the phone to talk about their week and check in with each other, see how the grandkids are doing, just at the general what's going on of it all. And Paula's weekly phone call with her parents was every Sunday, 6:30. The details of what transpired after Paula left work on Saturday, October 12th in 2002 are still being discovered. And over the last 5 years, I have learned details that are far from comforting. In an effort to discover where Paula and Brandon are today, I of course went back to October 12th, 2002 and have worked my way forward. The last 4 years have been incredibly informative. A compilation of court documents, family accounts, source statements, they all provide a clearer picture of the details than what was known to me just 5 years ago. In the hours after Paula left work on Saturday, she allegedly reached out for help. Now, this is a detail that we have discussed a little bit publicly, but not much. So you're going to get some more details about this too. So just hang on. For those who have been following this story, we have new information here. But for those who have not heard this story, we want to make sure everybody has all of the groundwork right in front of them. So it would appear that Paula was scared and she was trying to reach out for help with Brandon. My best summary of the information would lead me to believe that Paula wanted Brandon in a safe location. And the overall communication between her and this source, it was very short. But what we know from that communication that the source revealed to us, they were unable to assist Paula at that time, leaving me to believe that Brandon was with her that night. The more sourced information we obtain, the clearer that evening becomes. One source alleges that they attempted to contact Paula during the day. On Sunday, so she went to work on Saturday, she left work and no one has seen her since then. The following day, on Sunday, someone did try to make contact with her. And according to that person, they say they were unable to make contact, that Paula was not home, and that she did not answer the door. None of Paula's friends in Valdosta were able to make contact with her on Sunday. On occasion, Paula would meet up with friends in Valdosta to attend church together, just let their children play together. I find it very odd that on the last Sunday that Paula would be in Valdosta before she moved to Florida, she did not see any of her friends. Brandon did not see any of his friends. Paula's parents both went to bed on Sunday evening without a phone call. They were conflicted between concern and understanding. It was a really busy week, and Paula could have been tired, packing from working all week, taking care of Brandon. But back in Valdosta, no one realized that something had happened to the mother and son who lived at the Commons Apartments, now known as the Gables. The apartment complex is still there. The overall condition of the property and the buildings has deteriorated over the years without proper maintenance. The apartments are surrounded by a wooded area of land that stretches on for miles. The woods cover a vast area leading up to Interstate 75, multiple rivers, Valtech Road near the Lowndes Correctional Facility, Volume Power Sports. The entire inner city of Valdosta is just down the road. The street that the apartments are located on can also be a direct path to avoid town and get out of town if needed. Now, on Monday morning, it began as a usual morning at the Valdosta Sam's Club. But as everyone started their normal routine, they noticed that Paula, an employee who seemed to be adored by everyone at her job, was absent. She didn't call in sick or make any contact at all. This was just as unheard of as her not calling her parents for their Sunday evening chat. I'm told by everyone that Paula is prompt, an attribute that I can say seems to be hereditary in her family. Her absence was not only concerning, it was absolutely alarming. I don't know how many of you would have your coworkers show up to your home if you did not show up for work, but that is exactly what happened. Her coworkers knew that if Paula wasn't at work, something was wrong. They went to her apartment, and there was no sign of Paula or Brandon, except for her car that was sitting in the parking lot. The phone calls began. Police were notified, friends were called, and Paula's mother was contacted. Her mother's reaction, her screams of anguish, is forever embedded in the memory of Paula's sister. Family began making phone calls and plans to head to Valdosta. They just knew there had to be some explanation. Local media has covered the story of Paula and Brandon's disappearance in a conflicting and sometimes confusing way, leading the public to have far more questions than answers about the information that has been released over time, with no attempt to correct the record. Detective Chris Cruz once spoke to WTVM News and said, "We've given it every asset we have at this time looking for these individuals. We've put in 110% for them and their family that's still here living in the area." They had no family living in the area. I just wanted to correct that. Detective Cruz is allegedly no longer overseeing the investigation, and it has been passed down to Detective Garland. The case has passed through a variety of hands over the years at the Valdosta Police Department. A lack of morale and standards at the Valdosta Police Department has been a focal point in their local news reports over the years, including opinion pieces from high-ranking Valdosta law enforcement officers that are now deleted from the archives, from their archives, not ours. Now, police began looking inside Paula's apartment, checking through her vehicle. Everything was there. Her ID, her wallet, all the things you really would need if you were voluntarily leaving. Brandon's favorite toys. Everything was present – except Paula and Brandon. The apartment did not show any specific signs of a struggle, and her vehicle was taken into custody to collect any available evidence. In their search of the apartment, Paula's roommate was also absent, according to police. They later claimed that he was last seen at the apartment on October 15th, 2002. There are several conflicting details from police that they have never clarified, including their claims about speaking to Marcus Burroughs, as well as the location of Paula's vehicle, of Brandon's car seat, and specifics about the case that they may have incorrectly documented, and a few other details that I will not draw attention to at this time. This is for another future episode. We have collected equally as much information about the investigation as we have about the people of interest in this case. And there's a lot to discuss. What is done in the dark will always come to light. As the days passed, there was no sign of Paula or Brandon. 2 weeks after they were reported missing, police arrested a man for theft and booked him into the Lowndes County Jail in Valdosta. He was released within days, and police eventually realized that the man who they booked into the Lowndes County Jail for theft had given them a false name, and his true identity was Marcus Burroughs, Paula's roommate, who had moved to Valdosta from the Pelham, Georgia area to go to Valdosta State University. Now, sources have alleged that Marcus Burroughs seemed to be attempting to hide information about Paula and Brandon's disappearance from people who knew him in Valdosta. Another source alleged that Burroughs did something to harm Paula and Brandon. All the statements that have been made will remain allegations, as they have never been challenged in court, and no charges have ever been filed in relation to Paula and Brandon's disappearance. Stay with me, we have more. A lack of investigation and ground searches will absolutely lead to a lack of charges filed. A source who knew Marcus Burroughs came forward and told police that Paula and Brandon could be found in the woods near the Commons apartments where they lived. No evidence was ever recovered after this source shared this information. Nothing. Zip. In the following years after their disappearance, Paula and Brandon's family continued their search by utilizing missing persons organizations, media, advertising, and a lot of creative thinking. Meanwhile, Marcus Burroughs carried on with his life and eventually moved to Florida. Now, let me be clear, there is a large gap in some of the timeline that we are covering here. I do not believe that it is helpful for me to outline every step that Burroughs has ever taken. The pursuit for answers to what happened to Paula and Brandon is about truth and dignity. We will only be discussing the aspects that could be related to Paula and Brandon's disappearance or could clear Marcus Burroughs' name from the list of potential people of interest that police were interested in learning more about. After some time in Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, there's a lot of places, some places out west that Burroughs has traveled in and out of. He repeatedly ended up back in Florida, where he has significant relationships and associations. So a few years after Paula and Brandon disappeared, Marcus was allegedly wanted for an unrelated matter that would essentially put him back in front of police who were interested in learning more about what happened to Paula and Brandon Wade. Now, up until this time, Burroughs allegedly refused to speak in detail about their disappearance. What happened at this meeting with Marcus Burroughs, you might ask? And police is a complete mystery. Not because of a lack of information, but because of conflicting statements from law enforcement that have left major questions about what was actually said or what was not said during this meeting. There is no requirement for law enforcement to disclose the details while they are still investigating. But the issue is that they did disclose details at different times to different people, and the answers are very conflicting. Unfortunately, the answers are conflicting on several points of the investigation. This is not to disparage the individuals that have worked on the investigation. This is simply a fact. We have questions. The family of Paula and Brandon work with the Valdosta Police Department as much as possible to search for answers, and they appear to have a very grounded, good relationship with them. However, after speaking to multiple officers, detectives, and officials with Valdosta, it has become very difficult for me to look away from the glaring, conflicting statements. The meeting with Burroughs did not lead to any charges against him for the disappearance of Paula and or Brandon, and he was free to continue his life after that meeting. He continued to bob and weave in and out of Florida, and then we noticed something, a new address and a new name in the overall investigation and research we had done into the possible people of interest in this case. New information is always re-energizing, but it only lasts for so long. In this instance, it lasted an entire 45 seconds after a simple search of the new name was an instant punch in the face. In this type of scenario, I have to recalibrate before researching further. I have to maintain an open mind. It is vital. If you look for something hard enough, you'll find it. I want to be very, very clear about what I'm saying here. If you look for something hard enough, you will find it. It is highly important to ensure that we are always searching for the truth, not our own version of what we believe the truth is. So I walked away. I mentally recalibrated after I saw this new name and this new address. When I returned, it was time to get to work. Not for hours, not for days, for months and months. What I eventually discovered was that Burroughs was utilizing the address of a family who was investigated for possible international child trafficking, RICO crimes, civil disputes, abuse against their own children, abuse against multiple children they had adopted, abuses internationally against children who they were trying to acquire. The family has never been convicted of these claims. We need to make that crystal clear. But they have been investigated and they have had penalties applied to them for some of their actions, such as keeping proper documentation, failure to abide by a request from the government to dissolve their adoption businesses. There were also a variety of civil claims against them for alleged fraud in the international adoption industry. The adoption business was receiving complaints from clients and international organizations. Fraud, abuse, unethical practices were alleged by a variety of people who all had similar horrific stories. And then there were the children that they personally adopted. Some of them have spoken to me, and they have spoken about their experience. The alleged abuse that they endured inside that home. As I learned more, the question became, what is Marcus Burroughs' connection to this family? What exactly is the connection? It is a question that we have carefully, thoughtfully considered. We continue to speak to individuals who have knowledge about the arrangement and the overall details. There are no specific inferences to be drawn between Paula and Brandon Wade in this information at this time. but a detail that we want to be extremely thorough in researching, and also making sure we get it in front of the public as part of our research so that we can also be brought more information by others. It is simply a fact. We have learned in our pursuit for truth and dignity for everyone involved. This pursuit includes the attempt to eliminate names of any people of interest that we possibly can, Marcus Burroughs included. Now, the last 4 years have been a whirlwind of information. Meanwhile, life goes on. And that can be so difficult. That can be a difficult fact to digest for those who love Paula, for those who love Brandon. Their family appreciates each person who takes the time to share a post about them, listen to a podcast, or media interview about their disappearance, and each person who has invested time into trying to help find them. They are grateful to the public and to private individuals who take the time to share any information, big or small. I want to mention one more detail. In this pursuit for truth and dignity, I keep hearing certain details repeated. And one of those details is about Marcus Burroughs and how he appeared to behave around Paula and Brandon. And by all accounts, Marcus allegedly cared about Brandon and had become close to him during this time that they all lived together. I have heard a variety of positive statements about Marcus, and I feel it's only fair to mention that as well. The duality of humans can be a complex and frustrating experience. Every one of us harbors light and dark qualities. The facts and information that we have shared is not an effort to draw any inferences, but rather to discuss the facts in an effort to obtain additional facts.